Hi everyone, Alec here. My general topic was the assessment of English students with a disability. Initially, my question was basically just how does assessment and specifically standardized assessment affect the outcomes of ELs with disability? But as I did research, uh, it really seemed to be focused on the issue of identification itself. So my research question became, how do ELs suspected of having a disability or special education needs get entangled in the identification process? And what are the challenges of assessing ELs to help determine their eligibility? These two articles on the background really good to give a good overview of the issue. Among the major concerns is teachers just aren't prepared to address the needs of this unique population. Whether they have expertise in ESL or special ed, it's rare to have someone who has this dual expertise. So this unique population is a challenge, and it's particularly difficult to distinguish between what might be a learning disorder and what might just be the natural but very difficult process of second language acquisition. And so uh, it's it hasn't generally been as big of an issue from what I saw of uh, teachers trying to give their students enough time to see what they do. I think that's actually what should be happening. The issue seems to be the over referral of ELs, which could set them up for potential failure if you're not giving them a chance to see uh, if it's just a linguistic issue and whether they're doing okay with the current supports they have. And then there were also articles about specific issues with assessment. I'll try not to get too in the weeds here, but cultural bias is uh, definitely a known issue in assessments. And so some of the findings from my research were that uh, some experts might recommend purely nonverbal tests, but these alone are not reliable and not predictive of a student's success. So uh, so you can't avoid the issue of cultural bias by just having nonverbal tests. You still need the full battery, a full robust battery of different assessments. And tools like the cultural language interpretive matrix that might be used to assess whether an assessment uh, is culturally appropriate for a student. It from what I found, it might not actually be useful to help inform decision making for individual students. And then I also looked at a couple articles specifically about the challenges of assessing for autism, which I found really interesting. Um, First of all, ASD among a culturally and linguistically diverse population can be misidentified or underidentified. And this is partially because it's so hard to distinguish between social communication deficits and behaviors that might just be associated with ELs on the spectrum, and those associated with, again, the more normative second language acquisition process, which is as many of us know, extremely difficult. The cultural transition itself, the entering a new country and a new school system can just be overwhelming. And so it's really hard to distinguish between developmental issues that might be present and just the natural course of development of English language proficiency, which is also difficult in its own right. And so they recommend having a multidisciplinary team to help a school psychologist weigh different factors like English proficiency, like the family's degree of acculturation. Um, the school psychologists have to continue to try to critically evaluate those assessments. And one of the articles actually provided a really useful checklist for questions that a school psychologist or expert can ask themselves as they're going through the different assessments, the different observations and interviews with family members, really good reminders to this issue of cultural and linguistic diversity to help weigh those factors. In terms of further research, just this, we continue to need to study the social and behavioral development of this unique population, um, especially in relation to their peers who might have again the more normative second language acquisition experience. we have made tremendous strides in accommodations and modifications for ELs and special education students independently, but we still need to develop best practice of how to put them together for an individual student, because things like English language proficiency are a major factor in assessments and instruction. And then we also need professional development so that teachers and experts can better collaborate, and we can have a population of teachers that are more prepared to handle this unique population. And finally, before going into this, my goal was simply to sort of explore the best practice to inform my own teaching when I become a ESL teacher to help implement accommodations and modifications for students with a disability. But afterwards, my goal really became to sort of gain more expertise from my own background in anthropology. So from a sociocultural perspective, as it relates to ASD, so I could potentially help inform school psychologists in their evaluation and decision making. And finally, we have all my references here. You can pause it and look at them in detail if you want, but I will note this, this Dennison et al. Article is the one with that great checklist, and I think could be really useful for school psychologists. So you might wanna check that one out. Great, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to any comments you might have. Thank you.